Hi everyone, Jack Stratten here from Insider Trends. Firstly, thank you so much for making the time for joining us and for having me. I am going to look at some of the biggest trends as we see it at Insider Trends for 2021. Of course, because of the nature of this session and the length, I've really tried to boil down to a few key areas. And then what we can do in the last sort of 10, 15 minutes is maybe have a bit of discussion. So please do, as I'm going through the presentation, please do jot down any questions you have or anything you're confused about or any trends maybe that I haven't mentioned that you're particularly interested in. Please do pop them into the chat function because, of course, I won't have time to cover everything that could kind of be considered a major trend. I've just focused on a few key areas. So throw your questions in there. And then at the end, we should have 5 or 10 minutes to go through those. I should probably present for about 25, 30 minutes. So I think we should have plenty of time for that. So I'm just going to start now. And essentially, so retail trends for 2021. Let me tell you briefly about who I am. So I'm a senior consultant and co-founder of Insider Trends. We are a retail consultancy based in London. Not that it matters where you're based in these strange times, it's all virtual, but we're based in London. We work with retailers like this, helping them spot what's coming next in retail, helping them come up with new strategies, often through presentations and webinars. But also we kind of made our name doing retail safaris. We're doing virtual safaris now, but we were doing, of course, physical ones all over the world, and we'll do them again. So that's kind of where we build a lot of we build a lot of our knowledge. It comes from the networks we've built through these retailers. A lot of our data comes from those retail partners. And a lot of our understanding of retail actually comes from those innovators themselves. Particularly when we visit the stores, it allows us to get a picture of what's really happening. So that's a key part of who we are. And indeed, it kind of fuels how we work. I want to start by briefly discussing the mood for 2021. Obviously, at the moment, it's not especially good. We in the UK are in full lockdown. Like many parts of the world, we have new COVID variants. Our health systems all over the world are struggling. The UK's in particular, these are really challenging times. What I want to focus on for the purpose of this presentation is starting to just tentatively think about how what's happened to us over the last year might affect consumer behavior and buying trends as we look into the future. Because I think we've spent enough time, and I'm sure you guys have spent enough time thinking about the switch to online and the acceleration of online retail and online buying. But actually what we need to start thinking now is, will that affect consumer behavior post-pandemic? And how will it affect consumer behavior post-pandemic? And how will it affect, therefore, what retailers do? And what we do in the retail industry. I think that's really, really important. And especially because, as vaccinations go kind of through the world, we don't know when things will be opening up. But it certainly is a case that things are moving forward now. And we will, at some point, be a bit closer to potentially the retail world we had previously, where it's much safer to shop physically, but of course you'll still have the option to shop online in various other ways. So within that world of omni-channel options, what are buyers going to do? Are they going to continue exactly the same way? Will they go back to how they were? So tentatively, I'm going to kind of show you here some of the key statistics we pulled out. Could have used many, but these are the ones that have kind of, I think, most kind of piqued my interest. So in the US, 40% of consumers have tried a new shopping behavior. So, of course, for some consumers, that was buying online. That was a new shopping behavior. But actually, that also included that particular survey, buying through social media, using online content in the buying journey, using videos more, maybe downloading a retail app. So new shopping behaviors, and 40% of US consumers have adopted them. That's significant, of course. And no doubt a similar pattern across the world. 73% of US consumers intend to keep shopping in these new ways. So 73% of that 40% intend to keep shopping in these new ways. So we can suggest hesitantly that some of these behaviors will continue. Now, 53% of Brits say they will shop more online post-pandemic. I don't think that's any surprise at all. And it's the same, I think, to a large degree across Europe. In fact, in some parts of Europe, I think we'll see this pattern intensified. If you look at Southern Europe, e-commerce penetration in countries like Italy, for example, was less than 5% before the pandemic. That quickly went into double figures. And I think a lot of these new buyers are going to carry on doing that, especially as supply chains improve, especially as some of those retailers have had to invest in their supply chains. So I think online behaviors are going to continue to some degree. I think it would be dangerous to say for certain that exactly the same amount of online shopping will continue or the same rate of growth will continue. We can't say that. What we can say, I think fairly safely, is that some consumers will continue this pattern. But also 47% of brands say they're behind the curve in e-commerce. That shouldn't come as a surprise, but actually we've seen this in surveys throughout this period, right up until the end of 2020. Major brands, smaller brands all over the world still feel like they can't keep up with e-commerce for all sorts of reasons. Of course, their supply chains can't keep up. Their websites can't handle the volume of traffic. Their websites aren't good enough. The buying experience isn't good enough. Lots of reasons, but retailers still feel like they're behind. Now, this also I found particularly interesting. So what we have here are the kind of intended spending patterns of commerce businesses, Germany, US, and the UK. So a good spread of data here before COVID and since COVID. So green was before and red since COVID began. And what you can see is fairly straightforwardly that before COVID, people were spending on the things that you would expect them to: retail stores, wholesale distribution, third-party online marketplaces. The bulk of spend was there. But now, the most notable thing that retailers are spending their money on is new technology, new ways to engage buyers. So websites, chat and voice, social media, apps. That's where there has been some excess budget. And of course, there hasn't been much. It's been spent on new ways of kind of what I would call enhancing e-commerce, improving the e-commerce experience. I think technology that does that, definitely retailers are starting to invest in it. How that pays off, I think we won't see over until maybe another year or two. But those investments are starting to happen. And of course, it's to deliver customer service in a virtual world, to deliver a good buying experience in a virtual world requires new types of technology. That's one thing that we've seen the pandemic do. It's pushed the usability of certain technologies. Even augmented reality, for example, has never had its moment because it's never been useful enough. But that's starting to happen. All of a sudden, you really need the IKEA app to see where or how a piece of furniture looks in your home. You really need that technology because you can't have that in-store experience. Again, whether that continues, we don't know. But what's interesting is it's allowing buyers to actually use this technology for the first time. And that's really, really important, because that's what technology is all about. It's abstract until it becomes useful. And I think in light of some of these statistics, I think what we also have to consider is retailers, of course, are going to continue in 2021 to struggle and to not have big budgets. And I think importantly, smart retailers, we've seen lots of evidence of this, where they are investing in e-commerce, and digital commerce in general, they are investing in simple and practical tools that are proven to help them to sell more, improve their bottom line. So I've seen a lot of kind of pragmatic investment, I would call it, in digital commerce, rather than maybe more future-focused stuff. So, for example, digital receipts, that are an enormously effective way of improving, customer loyalty, getting people to buy into loyalty schemes, subscription services, growing your CRM. We've seen one provider that we work closely with has suggested that it can grow a CRM database by 900% in 12 months. That's the difference between using digital receipts and not. I've seen tons of brands all around the world suddenly go from not using digital receipts to using them. And it's simple tools like that that are having a big difference. A shop now, pay later, fulfilled by brands like Klarna, who I'm sure we all know well, having an enormous impact again. Lots of retailers investing in that. Again, because it's proven, it's practical, it helps the situation. They know that a lot of buyers are feeling more fragile about their purchasing. So that's been definitely something we've noticed. I think also just investing in meaningful content, because we know people aren't just spending more time buying online, they're simply spending more time online, full stop. So I think smart brands are investing more in online content where they can. I think that's really, really important. I would also say that simply brands who didn't have an e-commerce platform or a click and collect platform have started to meaningfully invest in that. We worked actually with Coop in Norway. And you know, the interesting thing with them is that they had something of an e-commerce platform, but it couldn't facilitate click and collect. And it was really piecemeal. They had it redesigned and built by a company that we know in 2 weeks. They basically went from no click and collect to click and collect in 2 weeks, which is extraordinary. And they've reaped the benefits since then. But again, it was a very practical investment. And that, I think maybe 2022, 2023, depending on what happens, depending how successful vaccinations are, maybe we'll see more innovative and potentially ambitious investment in different types of e-commerce and digital commerce technology. But actually, I think we're going to see more of this practical stuff that's proven to work and can just dial up what you're already doing, digital receipts and Klarna type shop now, pay later schemes. I think we'll see lots more of that because it's working and because these are safer investments. And on the theme of e-commerce, just to put into perspective how much this is shaping the strategies of some retailers, we were informed that John Lewis, they announced this in October of last year, despite closing lots of stores at the exact same time, they're investing £1 billion in digital and e-commerce. And they plan for 70% of sales to be online by 2025. At the moment, they're headed towards 50%, of course, because of the pandemic. They do have omni-channel plans. Omni-channel is a big part of that. So a lot of click and collect, a lot of fulfillment from stores. Profits, they think, will actually rise to £400 million by 2025 as a result of this investment. But also, and importantly, they're planning on getting to net zero carbon emissions by 2035 as a result of this, because they've found out that for them, omni-channel retail is actually far more environmentally friendly than pure play or from a store-dominated retail ecosystem. Actually, there's a better balance when they have online and offline. So that was quite interesting. But John Lewis, I think, are reflective of what a big business is sort of smartly doing in reaction to this stuff. They think that these buying behaviors to some degree are going to continue, and they're kind of using COVID as a reason to maybe do some of the things they've wanted to do before. John Lewis were always on this kind of ambitious drive in the UK to push e-commerce, and this has given them a reason to do that. I think we'll see more of this. I think we'll see more brands slightly more ambitiously investing in e-commerce, not even necessarily to close stores, but to look at e-commerce channels as maybe starting to take the lion's share of sales, allowing physical stores to do something different and not necessarily just experience, like people in my world have talked about for years. I think it might, again, be more practical. Stores might become a way of solving returns and a way of solving more practical issues. So I think that's important. Now, another key trend I think we're going to see just kind of speed up a little bit over 2021, something that's starting to happen already, we've called evolved e-commerce. This is really coming as a result of the fact that buyers, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar can relate to this, buyers are getting bored of almost of the ultra convenience of online buying. Okay, so we've all had that moment where we've been on buying our weekly food shop, and you start to realize that you're eating the same things every week because the algorithm has worked out what you're ordering every week, and it becomes really fast to order. You get your slot, you know the items that you want to buy, and it's a really fast experience, and it's great. People who aren't into shopping love it. But do you know what? Actually, a lot of people, and both Deloitte and Bain have picked up on this in various surveys. They found that there's something, I think they've called it the kind of grocery rut is happening, which is where you're buying that stuff and you're actually getting really bored. E-commerce is actually so convenient that it's not very fun. It lacks that inspiration, actually. The inspiration you get from even the most boring physical shop in the world that just happens when you wander about and you notice something that you haven't planned to buy. Those simple little moments, e-commerce largely hasn't managed to capture. It's kind of got too good at being convenient, frictionless, and functional. So actually, e-commerce, I think, is starting to recognize a need to tap into being, I suppose, more engaging and kind of appealing to our emotional sides more. And this is kind of where I've noticed some really interesting things happening. Chewy.com, a pet food company, and this is just one example. They're one example of a brand who last year during the pandemic, they grew their subscription side of the business enormously. So 50% average increase in new subscriptions during COVID. And the global subscription economy is expecting a 68% CAGR between 2019 and 25, equal to around $500 billion. Massive growth in subscriptions. And that is something I think we'd think about as evolved e-commerce, because what it's starting to do is more cleverly understand what we're doing and why we're buying and improving that. But how that's happening, and actually Chewy.com do this, and all kinds of companies now that you wouldn't expect are selling subscriptions. People are buying bacon, I saw this year, on subscription, as well as pet food and all kinds of stuff. And it's happening because we're seeing a lot more of this, actually live streaming, and basically building a connection between the brand and the buyer online is happening more and more. And live streaming has really gone mainstream, I think, in 2020. And we'll see more of this in 2021, not necessarily even because consumers definitely want it, but because retailers are investing in this all the time. And there's some early evidence that it works. So we've seen it from big brands, especially in the world of fashion and beauty. L'Oreal in Malaysia regularly did these kind of virtual beauty festivals where they would sell an enormous amount of product immediately after. Again, they'd sell subscriptions, and that's something that Chewy and other brands have said they've done. They've kind of had live streaming events or live streaming from stores, and then they sell subscriptions pretty quickly afterwards, and it's working really, really well. So I think, that's an important part. But what I would also suggest that's significant is actually realizing whoever you are and whatever retailers you might work with. This isn't something just for L'Oreal. Live streaming has gone mainstream, meaning a lot of brands are doing this. Shell and Company are a fairly big electronics company in Sweden, but of course they just operate in the Nordics. But they've invested in live stream in a very practical way. What they allow to do is a lot of their in-store staff or even staff at home simply to live stream about electronics products and very simple things, how to connect them, how to charge them, how to fix them, all kinds of simple things that they used to solve in store. They just switched that service and kind of provided really great customer service online. When they started doing these live streaming events, they noticed that they would do 2 weeks of store sales in the equivalent of 45 minutes. And I've heard lots of these stories, actually, even from smaller businesses, that live streaming has really, really worked. And it's not just plugging a gap, I think, left by COVID. I think we'll see long after COVID more and more live streaming in the store. And it just makes sense because the store can just carry on operating as a normal store, except you have this enormous potential audience who can be having that same experience as the people in the store. So I think we're going to see loads more of that. And I'll touch on a couple of other examples later. But live streaming is here to stay, I think, from in the store as well. It makes such a good use and also just keeps staff, I think, busy and engaged, and also potentially really increasing their sales. At a time where maybe traditional sales of someone walking into a store and buying something are on the decline. This seems a smart move, and I think we'll see more of this. And just finally, you would have seen this already, but there's a lot of augmented reality kind of beauty try. And I would say augmented reality is really starting to have its moment within the beauty industry. So all kinds of brands, one of the most common is MAC. MAC have teamed up with Amazon, but also they're doing stuff on YouTube where they basically work with influencers. And during a live video, you can try on a particular makeup, maybe a lipstick, and you can try on lots of different shades whilst you're watching the video through your own phone. Simple app, it works. It's really easy to use. It's practical, usable augmented reality. It's not that kind of future-focused sci-fi augmented reality that's always felt a bit gimmicky in retail. I've been talking in retail for 10 years about augmented reality being interesting, but never quite having its moment. But it is starting to, because, for example, MAC have reported millions of dollars of sales as a result of this. And it's so cheap for them to do. It's so simple. And it's engaging people. And again, will this just suddenly stop once people can go back to beauty counters in person? No, it won't. It will continue. That's not to say everyone will do it, but I think some of it is bound to continue. So I think we'll see more and more brands investing in this where it's useful, where they're in an industry that can really offer a usable use of augmented reality or similar technology to build that emotional connection with the customer that gets rid of some of the functional e-commerce stuff that customers just aren't that into. So I'd also like to mention, I've got a couple more trends, and I think this is significant. everyone in retail rightly has been talking about omni-channel for a long time now. It's become a bit of a buzzword and therefore a little bit meaningless, but I think we just need to remember what it really means, which is a very simple thing. It just means lots of different channels, all the different channels that a retailer could have within their own ecosystem. And I think what's interesting is we could have easily predicted at the beginning of the pandemic, with everyone going online, that omni-channel would almost be weakened in the sense that where's the point in that link between the physical store and buying online? Because we're now going to bypass that and these stores are going to be closed and maybe they'll stay closed. But this hasn't actually been how it's played out. So e-commerce sales increasing, this was in April of last year, and I saw similar stats throughout the year. UK retailers, they actually saw online only increase by 8%, but multi-channel retailers saw sales increase by 36%. This is massively significant and something we've been seeing all over the world. That actually, omni-channel brands with a good, solid e-commerce offering have outperformed online-only brands in many cases. Of course, not always, but overall they have. And Target in the US are a brilliant example of this. So Target at the beginning of the pandemic, they weren't that heavily investing. They were doing click and collect and bits of curbside pickup, but they weren't exactly sure pre-pandemic what their mix should be in terms of omni-channel. Where should the focus be? Should they be focusing on click and collect? Actually, should it just be home delivery from fulfillment centers? But they quickly worked out over the last couple of years, the home delivery from a fulfillment center represented 100% of their cost. Home delivery from the store represented 60% of their cost. So immediately they started investing more of that. But far better, click and collect, curbside pickup, paid shipped, any safe way that's kind of COVID friendly for their customers to come and pick up the items from somewhere, 10% of the cost. And again, I mentioned it earlier, it's been proven this year to be a more environmentally friendly way also of kind of fulfilling orders. So this has been enormously significant, and Target have had an incredibly successful period throughout this because it's allowed them to really understand the best way of making omni-channel work. They've turned a lot of their stores, they've kind of split them in half and made them kind of part fulfillment, part selling to the general public. So they can do lots of different things, online orders, click and collect, curbside fulfillment. And they've realized, Target have a lot of massive stores. They were worried before the pandemic. What do we do with all this space? This is a problem we have with lots of UK retailers, ones that are closing as we speak, like Debenhams. They have enormous stores all over the country. And they've been thinking for years, what do we do with that excess space? And they've thought about experiences. And that might work to an extent, but it rarely leads to a very rapid improvement in bottom line. Whereas what Target are doing really does. Just make it easier for people to be able to buy the stuff they want, collect the stuff they want quickly. And it also links with this need that I'll talk about soon. I think, and we'll come back to this, but this growth in kind of local buying, Target's model fits really well with this because they have a massive store footprint in the US. And if suddenly you can use those stores to deliver and organize click and collect, that's a big impact potentially. This is a slightly newer trend that I think we'll only just see emerging this year. I think it'll be a long time before it takes off, but it's my personal belief that this has big potential. What it is personalized pricing. I've heard that Kroger in the US are investing in it, and I know Nike are already doing it at some spaces as a trial, and Chobani Yogurts also have tried it out in the US. Fairly simply, what it allows to do is someone who's an app user or some kind of regular user of your brand, and you can somehow record that activity. What it allows them to do is when they scan your product, it comes up with a price that is just for them and maybe includes a unique discount. But that discount can be based on anything. So what Nike are trialing is the idea that they can actually reward customers with discount that are personalized just to them based on their activity, not just what they spend, but on activity. So for example, if they're frequently sharing their content on social media, or if they go to the store a certain number of times, or if they attend a Nike event, it could be anything, but they're starting to reward customers for their actions. It's actually a reaction to trends within Generation Z and younger millennials. And a lot of consumer surveys point to the fact that those audiences, not only do they have a lower disposable income, so personalized pricing and discounts really appeal to them, but also, and very importantly, they are really more willing to interact with brands actually than previous generations. They will download the app if it's useful because they're more used to that technology, but they're more willing to interact with brands. So they like the potential of personalized pricing because it gives them the option to be rewarded for actions and for actually, because they really will share their content, they will engage with the brand, they will give them feedback or whatever it is that allows you to do personalized pricing. This is a newer and emerging trend, but I think we'll see more and more. Of course, it'll be larger brands able to do it at first because it's based largely on artificial intelligence and it's reasonably expensive and complex to build. But I think we'll see more and more brands doing it. Another key related trend to the omni-channel concept, though, is about the fact that more and more people are buying locally. We've seen so much of this in the UK. 83% of people prefer to shop instead of nearby instead of online if they know an item is available in a nearby store. This statistic is fueling the fact we actually have a number of tech companies in the UK who are opening up purely to solve this particular issue. So they are third-party companies who are linking a store's inventory to their website, or even sometimes just to Google searches. So when you look for something like a light bulb, that it will immediately tell you that is stocked at this store, which is just a few hundred meters from your front door. It's feeding that kind of local habit that's growing. So localized buying, of course, during COVID is very practical. People aren't traveling, so of course they're buying more locally. But I think there's also some anecdotal evidence to suggest that some of that will stay because it's not just convenient. People are enjoying shopping locally, actually, in the UK. And they're kind of reconnecting with their high streets and realizing they want their high streets to improve. They may well be working from home or remotely for years in advance. So now they're not going into London or Manchester and they're able to buy their fancy lunches and coffees. They want their local high streets to improve. They want good shops and services, and they'll support them when they're there. So there's some evidence that this is starting to change. And also on this slide, you'll notice I've just looked at search volumes for items in nearby stores has consistently increased. So lots of evidence to suggest that local is happening. And then some other stats that support that. 50% of global customers are choosing to shop local during the pandemic, and 68% of US consumers say they will carry on buying local post-COVID. This is an important trend. There's absolutely no way this won't continue in 2021. Beyond that, it'll be interesting to see how much it sticks when we're able to get back out there and buy wherever we want, and maybe we're commuting back to cities more and more. How will that change? It remains to be seen. But certainly in 2021, I think local buying will continue. And just briefly to mention Farmstead, which is an incredible company I think you should look up if you don't know them, based in the Bay Area in the US. What they're doing, it's an app, but they've basically got lots of different farmers and food makers, cafes, food companies to register for the app. And it's an app for customers, for buyers. And basically they just put the items that they want on a weekly shop, and the Farmstead app finds all of your nearest suppliers, and a Farmstead employee will collect items from all those different local suppliers and put it together in a box. And then the buyer knows they're getting the most local ingredients for everything that they want to buy, but also in a very efficient way, and they only pay a small premium for it. It rewards local buyers, organic foods, all that good stuff that people are passionate about, but it also does it in an affordable way because it really is using the nearest suppliers. So it's kind of technology starting to solve through AI. So this is all based on artificial intelligence, but starting to solve that kind of local need. The Farmstead are already looking at going beyond food and doing it with other products as well. So finally, I just wanted to briefly mention return and resale, which I thought I couldn't not really mention because it's just grown so much in this period. So 70% of UK customers believe sustainability is very or quite important. We're not surprised about that. Interest over time I've looked at, and it's sort of gradually increasing. We shouldn't be surprised that people care about sustainability. We know that. Are they going to, at what point do we think that's going to start to really change? I don't know. Change into, people really changing their buying decisions. I think that's only anecdotal at the moment. But it's definitely influencing what retailers are doing. And you'll see from brands like Allbirds, it's a completely different e-commerce experience. It's even different in their stores. They will label every single material and its kind of carbon footprint that goes into every single shoe. And actually, it kind of fuels the price point. This is a fairly expensive product, but people are happy to pay more because they feel they're buying something that's more transparent, more environmentally friendly. So that's playing out in the world of products, and it's having some impact on what people are buying, how much they'll spend. But I think more meaningfully, this sustainability stuff in a kind of practical COVID way is feeding into this. So actually, what we'll see over the next 10 years is that the biggest growth in the fashion sector, for example, will be in resale. So that's the yellow columns there, resale and secondhand. That's where the growth is interestingly going to be. So smaller growth in off-price, direct-to-consumer growing at a reasonable rate, but it will be resale that's really where the growth is going to be, which is fascinating and not something many people would have predicted years ago. Partly practical again, 35% of people would like courier collection from home as standard post-pandemic. That's because some brands have started to do it. And of course, customers love it because it's just another way in which e-commerce has got even better, or people have become willing to actually start buying even clothes. Because when that problem of something doesn't fit and I need to return it, when even that element is solved and made easy and convenient, it really does eliminate the need of those other buying experiences. You really can do everything online. And I just wanted to mention Happy Returns, because Happy Returns have been enormously successful during the pandemic. It's basically a returns counter that can be a standalone thing, but normally you'll see it within a shop. So certain retailers have just brought Happy Returns in. There's something like 1,200 of these counters in the US. So a retailer can have them at the front of the store, to the back, the side, wherever, just a small area. And it just works on returns. Very, very simple kind of process. Such a slick way of kind of solving this. And it reacts to consumer trends. People have learned during the pandemic that returns is one of the big problems for managing e-commerce effectively, for making money from it. And I think third-party companies like Happy Returns that can solve it for a brand is something we'll see much more of. That kind of linking up with tech companies. I think it will be a similar thing to what we've seen with those kind of last mile companies who've helped a lot of food companies, cafes, restaurants, grocers during the pandemic to fulfill. Those third-party companies have come in like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, whatever, and they've solved that problem. Happy Returns, I think, could be it, or similar to them. That could be the answer to this growth in the demand for resale and return. And just a final comment I wanted to make, and I think also it's particularly important for me, is this isn't necessarily a big retail trend, but it's just something that's massively important for me to communicate to all of you. And that's that flexibility and resilience has really been the kind of winner. And when I say flexibility and resilience, I really mean those two things combined. I think that brands that have been able to be flexible have been rewarded. And that, for me, is the biggest thing to take away for brands in the future, the ones that survive, is when things like this happen again, when there's a financial crash, and things will happen again. When we're preparing for future problems, when we're preparing for a difficult future for whatever reason, flexibility is so important. The brands that have done well, like Target, have very quickly been able to flip what they do as a business. They've been able to use their store network to kind of, we call it pivots. They're kind of these retail pivots where maybe they're selling in one way and then suddenly they're selling in another to react to the consumer trends very, very quickly. As opposed to, say, Primark in the UK, which had no e-commerce platform, and then for most of the pandemic sold nothing because everything was closed. They didn't have enough flexibility built into the business to be able to sell in a different way. So I think flexibility is massively important. And I almost mean resilience and flexibility is the same thing. So Beauty Counter, for example, a brand here, but there's loads of others, Spiritland in the UK, Microsoft have done this, Staples Connect. What they're doing to kind of be resilient is they very quickly allowed people to live stream from their stores. So even when lockdowns were on, they got influencers, relevant customers and their own staff live streaming in the store about interesting information. So they were still able to sell stuff. They were still able to serve customers. They're still able to use the spaces. They did it rapidly. They didn't really alter the stores. They just did it with the stores as they were. I think that was a really, really smart way of getting some use out of it. And that's been happening a lot now. Off-White in Miami. We've seen a similar thing with JMBY in China, and Silver Room in Chicago. They're notable because they've actually built new stores during the pandemic. So well worth knowing for anyone interested in physical stores beyond this. The fascinating thing about all three is they're all completely modular stores. Every single part of the store can be moved around. They've done it. They are appealing to a younger audience as well, but they've done it because they fully expect that things couldn't work out and maybe they'll have to close, and it makes it easy to shut down for a period of time. But also they can react to, if someone wants to come and live stream, they can change the look of the store. If they have an influencer coming in, they can change the look of the store. If they suddenly want to fulfill online orders, they can move everything back and change the way that the store is laid out. This is really significant. And I've also noted that Off-White and some of these brands have negotiated contracts with their landlords and leaseholders where they're allowed to change the use of the store very quickly. So if they want it to suddenly become a delivery hub, it can. That's massively significant because in the UK, a lot of retailers weren't legally allowed to turn their store into a warehouse. It wasn't legal. And that's an important part with new stores, even those practical things. How can you make sure that you're allowed to deliver from that physical space? So modular, flexible spaces that can change quickly, I think that's a big trend we'll see more of. Eden in New York is another fascinating example. They actually have done okay during the pandemic, so physical space. The reason they've done okay is they largely operated as a space where you can, broadly speaking, where you can work from there. So it classed itself as a retailer, but every time you go in there, there's just people working. And they were allowed to reopen earlier than some retailers in New York, fascinatingly, because it was classed as an essential space because people worked from there. Eden, it's a newer store model, but again, it's the idea of flexibility. They've built a real kind of use into their store. So yes, they sell stuff. So Eden do all kinds of different products, but the store itself, the space, one of the main ways it makes its money is actually just having people in there working from their laptops and selling coffee and stuff like that. And I think that kind of flexibility has proven to be really important as well. Can you do more than just sell stuff? Because if you can do that, if you can provide services, then maybe they can help you out when the buying online takes over. There's different ways of approaching that problem. So flexibility, massively important. And finally, and this is more relevant to bigger retailers, I think, but we do need to consider this, is that online advertising is becoming increasingly difficult for brands of all sizes. This was in 2016 and 17. I gather that the statistics are even more damning now. What it shows is that with a 42% increase in online advertising spend as a retailer, you generally only get an 11% increase in visits. In other words, you're losing money whenever you advertise online. Most retailers, that's a reality. It shouldn't surprise people. Just look at Google AdWords. It's becoming incredibly competitive for whatever you're trying to sell. It's only going to increase this year with the result of the pandemic and more brands coming online. What that means is potentially that we're going to see more physical stores simply as advertising spaces. I've seen this the last couple of years more and more. Is bigger brands are saying, if we're going to sell online and we don't want to get rid of our physical stores, we have to just accept that our physical spaces are adverts. They're adverts for the brand. They're places to communicate what we do. They're places to get people writing about us. They're places to make people excited about the brand and to buy into what we do and who we are. And that's, I think that's important for the future of spaces, because if there is a balance where actually you're a brand and 60% of your customers buy online, only 40% buy in physical stores, maybe physical stores become a supporter of online sales rather than the place for people to buy stuff. And maybe they become the place to advertise rather than online. I don't know that this is a trend we'll see among all of retail, but I think among big retailers, we'll see this happen more and more in the next couple of years. And in summary, I just wanted to briefly just mention the fact that the most successful brands, actually, from my experience, the handful of most successful brands, other than grocers and essential retailers, who of course have done incredibly well, have been brands who were digital first brands before this happened. So brands that already had their e-commerce or online buying in place. Peloton are a really good example of this, because they have lots of physical spaces now, but the physical spaces were only ever there to support the rest of the business, which is a product, an exercise bike, and a kind of online community of exercising online with these fitness videos that you get. So you buy an exercise bike, but what you're really buying into is a kind of online community. Now, businesses that are set up like that, set up as online communities, Glossier in the UK, a makeup brand, very much the same. They've done really, really well because it hasn't mattered whether they had stores or not. Their kind of tools, their ways of selling and their ability to sell were all in place already. Their supply chain was there, their engagement with customers was already there. So those brands, to be honest, they've just been able to be more and more successful. And to be honest, I do think we're going to see more of those brands continuing to be successful, especially as the pandemic continues and fades away, but quite potentially even afterwards, because I think our behaviors have changed. And we are going to continue to buy online and engage online. That's not to say physical stores don't have a future, because they absolutely do. But digital first brands are going to be successful. And I think for anyone that's a traditional retailer with a lot of physical stores, there's a lot to learn from a digital first brand. That is all the presentation, but we're just going to spend maybe 5-10 minutes running through the questions. I can see a lot in here, which is fantastic. So I'm just going to go to the top and work my way down. In fact, I'll go to the I'm going to go to the public one just so I can make sure I can see your names. So I'm going to start with Esther. And thank you for this, Esther. Where to start with the e-commerce part of your business is behind the curve. It's a good question, Esther. I think it really depends on, how far behind the curve you are and what kind of a business yours is. So are you at a point maybe where you've got almost, you've just got a very basic e-commerce platform, or is it actually a bit more advanced and you just need to enhance it? But what I would definitely say is looking for practical tweaks of your website. That's the important thing to begin with. Is not investing in anything that's kind of too high tech initially. Get the basics right. So for example, I met the examples I said in my presentation. I really do think things like digital receipts, and depending on what you sell, the kind of Klarna shop now, buy later approach, loads of brands are offering that now, or third-party companies. I think practical things like that are really important. But the other thing I would say is just starting with optimizing your website if you haven't done that already. Even a small amount of money with a really good SEO, so search engine optimization company, you can spend relatively small amount of money, maybe just like get a kind of smart student even who could look at your website and give it an assessment and just sharpen up in terms of how easy it is to find your items on your website, how well your website converts. So when someone goes to your website, how often are you making sure they buy something? How often are you making sure they come back? So what's your communication like after they first contacted you? I would focus on the core elements like that, improving all the core elements, just making sure you do the basics right, that you provide a good user experience on your website that is optimized for people to find you in the first place, and that you really convert those visitors. And then, of course, start to move on to these little practical tweaks. And then as it improves, of course, that stuff I mentioned in evolved e-commerce, you can do more and more. But I think it really is about getting the basics right. And the good news is I think a lot of the basics, it isn't that expensive these days. There's a lot of people around who are very good, and of course, very eager to find work and to help businesses like yours as well. So thank you, Esther. Marlin's question, how do you see future in sales regarding home deco articles, such as blinds, online versus brick stores? It's a really good question. My gut feeling, based on what's happening, is that I think the stores and the online in that particular scenario both have a purpose to serve. Because I think particularly when it comes to home deco, DIY, whatever you want to call it, I've noticed in the UK that stores have actually remained open in this most recent lockdown, and they're still fairly busy. They've done fairly well throughout. Their websites for all those big companies like B&Q in the UK, the websites are getting much better. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Again, kind of some of them trialing augmented reality. So you can do it with paint. There's an augmented reality kind of with a paint company in the UK where you can match paint through your phone on the wall and whatever. There's some cool stuff going on. But people are still going to the stores. And I think from what I can see, the reason they're still going to those stores, they still want to speak to someone in person. They still, when it comes to home deco, it doesn't matter how good the information is, how good YouTube videos are or whatever, there's something about going to see that person, that trade person who really understands home deco products. And I think it's not the same in all industries, but industries that are really led by experts, really rely on experts, I think they're going to be a bit more secure in terms of physical spaces because people will keep wanting that personal level of service. All I would say is it's really important to see if you can actually allow that to happen a bit more virtually. So make sure that those experts that you might have in a home deco store, make sure that they can talk to your customers that are online too. Give them a platform, whether it's Skype or whatever else. Make sure they're available to speak to your customers online. So there's a lot of missed opportunities out there for people in stores working for brands who aren't talking to online customers. For me, that's a missed opportunity because it's just the same as going into stores. And also older shoppers who we might think won't use this technology. It's absolutely not true. They will once they've used it for the first time. If there's one thing we've learned from the pandemic, it's that any generation will use technology if it's useful and if it's easy to use and it's there, they will use it. So I think that's something to think about. Henk has asked, what do these fancy high-tech trends mean for a small local retailer? A good question, Henk, and some of them are fancy and high-tech. I would say what they mean above all is if you aren't investing anything, the one takeaway I would have is if you aren't looking at e-commerce at all, about having an online presence, even not even buying online, but being searchable online, you must. That's the one thing I would take away as a basic thing is even if you continue to focus on physical retail in your business, or even if you're not doing very much stuff online, the most important thing is to just do something. So even if you aren't building an e-commerce platform, just make sure that your business is searchable online, get the basics right. So when someone looks for you online, they can find out about you, they can see some good recommendations, because everyone, and especially young buyers, are looking online for recommendations. That's just a part of our experience now. We all do it for everything we buy, whether we go on holiday or we buy a light bulb from a company, we're looking for recommendations. So get recommendations online, make sure you're easily searchable through Google Maps, make sure pricing is there available online, make sure your services are lifted. Just get the basics of e-commerce sorted as a kind of starting point. And none of that is high tech, but it's very, very important. And also just doing a bit of social media and engaging people there, I think, is vital. Bart Van Bommel, which makes me think of Mark Van Bommel, who's a footballer I used to love. And someone said I looked a bit like years ago as well. Do you expect that certain industries, e.g. around the home, high involvement products, will drop again in post-COVID period? It's a really, really good point, those kind of DIY and gardening products that everyone's gone mad for. And you put also in e-commerce channels versus physical stores. I think they might slightly, because I think people are going to be going back to work and back to going on holiday and different things. So lifestyle changes after COVID, from the stats we're seeing, the reason people are buying that stuff is because they're doing nothing. So logic dictates when people are doing stuff again, that even just going out for dinner and having other activities, they're going to buy less homeware stuff, potentially. And also, I think probably we will see, again, people buying it more from physical stores, that kind of stuff. But I don't think we'll see a massive kind of cliff edge, because the thing about COVID is that there is definitely not going to be a scenario where the way we're buying and the things we're doing are going to change from 1 month to the next. It's going to be a gradual change, whatever it is. So maybe if our habits in terms of buying homewares decline, I think it will be gradual. I don't think there's going to be a cliff edge scenario, because for most of us, it's going to be a while before we're really doing those things we want to be doing anyway. Even when travel is lifted, travel is going to take a long time. It's going to be more expensive initially. A lot of people won't be able to do it. So I think some of that will be slow. Tom has put, you said that sustainability is increasingly important for customers, but at the moment, to what extent do you think this is a factor in their purchase decisions? And to what extent, according to you, should retailers push or communicate sustainable initiatives or purchase options, except from a CSR perspective? Really good question, Tom. It's a really complex question. I think that my gut feeling at the moment is that we've been talking for years about the fact that consumers, I think the biggest thing here is that there's a big difference, and I know we all do this, there's a difference between what people say they do and what people do. And that is never more relevant than with sustainability. For example, in the UK, there's this joke that everyone says they hate Amazon, and yet everyone buys from Amazon, right? Everyone hates Amazon, but everyone's spending their money with Amazon all the time. So definitely in the UK, and I'm sure all over the world, we have that kind of slightly hypocritical behavior. No one's immune to it. So I think you definitely have to be cautious and measured in the way you invest in what you do sustainability-wise. I think it's about doing the right things, doing the basics, telling good stories about the things you are doing, and showing the customers that you care about it, engaging with it. But I do think you have to be cautious about how much you invest in it, because there isn't yet tons of data suggesting that people really do spend more when something is labeled as sustainable. There's some limited evidence, but most of that evidence you'll find is based on Generation Z and young millennials. You know, and ultimately we see this across Europe and the world. The people spending the most money before the pandemic, during the pandemic, it's still people kind of over the age of 40 and 50, because they have the most disposable income. They're the most financially secure. They're still the biggest spenders. And from what we're seeing, they're not heavily influenced by things that are marked sustainable. That's not to say they don't care about sustainability, but when it comes down to it, will they pay more for it? I don't think we can say that for certain. So I think you have to be cautious about how much you invest in it. If I'm talking from a practical point of view and about business just surviving and getting by the next couple of years, I don't think that is where you should be investing your money. That's not a popular thing to say in the retail world. Trends people are always trying to say it's all about sustainability. It should be what all businesses do. But also, I think maybe we have to just try and survive first and then focus on that slightly afterwards. And Jacqueline here, what is your advice for smaller retailers without web shop concerning the most easy and low cost technologies to reach their consumers online? Really good question, Jacqueline. And I would definitely say online marketplaces without question. So, you know, within your industry, find the online marketplaces, find the Amazon equivalents, the places where people are buying your stuff. And of course, that could be eBay, that could be Amazon and various places. But I really believe in just being in those spaces. And of course, just start small. Don't spend very much money getting stuff online. Just trial it. See which products work. Play around with how you promote them, how you market them. Share that you're on those spaces in social media. Just start in a limited way. And the great thing about selling on online marketplaces is, generally speaking, all you lose is a commission from the sale. Normally, there's no major upfront cost. And you get all that great branding and that quality of online experience that's provided by the marketplace. It's not something you have to worry about. So my massive recommendation would be that online marketplace is where we are. And by the way, that would be for anyone who's still listening. Absolutely, online marketplaces are incredibly important, continue to be important. We can't ignore the fact that whatever I've just said in the last 45 minutes, the website that's done the most retail traffic consistently throughout the pandemic is Amazon. Online marketplaces, we're just getting more and more used to how they work and how efficient they are and how much choice there is. And when you're on one of those marketplaces, at least you have the potential to hit millions of people. I think it's a really good way to start. I actually think it's better in some cases than immediately just building an e-commerce platform that might cost you, a few €1,000 at least. So that's how I would begin. And just search within your industry, wherever you operate, Jacqueline, and kind of find the ones that, from what you can see, it might not be a major one. There might be a more niche online marketplace for whatever products or services you sell. I think that is everything. So thank you so much for all of the questions and all your engagement. And oh, hang on. No, I think there's one more that I've only seen. Gerald, I won't miss out Gerald in case he's still here. And he said, thank you very much. Just be sure you used figures from 2017 to show online advertising is not paying off. Is that fair to do so? It's a very good point. Gerald, part of the reason we've been doing that, we've been using that slide, is because the data that we've seen from recent years is even more exaggerated, but the surveys have been from much smaller selection of websites, so maybe 2,000 or 3,000. And broadly speaking, the data set from that one, I think, is 16,000 websites. We still use that because we feel like it's a more reliable data set overall. But you make a very good point. It is 4-year-old stats, and I'm impressed with your attention to detail. That should put you in very good position for retail in 2021. But thank you, and a good question. And I think that's all of the questions. There's nothing else. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for all the lovely comments. Really nice to share this with you. I will share this deck with Retail Trends, the organisers, and then they'll be able to share it with any webinar attendees. I think they probably recorded it anyway. But the deck will be there as a PDF for you to use and share as you and feel free to do so. And if you want to contact me further about anything that I've mentioned today, but equally if in your retail business you're interested in any kind of support in any way, consultancy, planning your next steps in 2021, pop me an email, Jack at insider-trends.com, or just head to our website. You'll find out more, and check out our blogs as well, because they're full of good tips and advice. So thank you so much, and I really hope you all have a really, really good and most importantly safe 2021. All the best. Thank you.